Hi listeners, Jason here. We are excited to finally announce registrations for the biggest psych health and safety community event ever. The inaugural The Psych Health and Safety Conference will be held at the Sofitel Wentworth, Sydney, June 19 to 20, 2024 and offer concurrent virtual attendance. It'll feature live podcast recordings with OG researchers including Christina Maslach and Michael Leiter of Burnout fame, Psych Health and Safety USA podcast host I. David Daniels, Australian super experts including the likes of David Burrows, a special 10-year anniversary integrated approaches to workplace mental health panel with authors Tony Lamontagna, Angela Martin and Kat Page, hand-picked case studies from organisations doing it well, and a very special interview with plaintiff Zaggy Kozarov by Catherine Dunlop on that High Court case which we previously covered on the podcast. This event will sell out. Get in quick to secure tickets at early bird prices for the 2-day conference, pre-conference masterclasses, and the VIP dinner. The first 200 in-person registrations also get a copy of her latest book, The Burnout Challenge, signed by Christina Maslach herself. Find out more and register at www.psychhealthandsafetyconference.com. Now, on to this episode.
The occupational health and safety community continues to evolve in its understanding of the concept of psychological health and safety. We'll talk with a safety professional and podcaster about a variety of safety-related topics, including a playbook for safety managers. Up next on this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each episode, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk Psych Health and Safety. Welcome to this week's Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. So, one of the important reasons that we do this podcast is to facilitate conversation about psychological health and safety, and to do so from an occupational health and safety viewpoint and perspective. So, one of the ways we do that is to chat with folks who understand physical health and safety and translate that knowledge into addressing psychosocial hazards. So issues related to stress and burnout and overall workplace mental health have traditionally fallen on the desk of someone in human resources. But recently, there's been a realization that these hazards, and that's what they are, the hazards that we can't really see, in some cases are at the root of some of the physical harm and damage that we actually can. So in those situations, an environmental or occupational health and safety professional is likely going to be involved early on. Hopefully they're involved early on in both the conversations before and the actions after an incident. So essentially the same skill that one can use for a physical hazard can be used to manage and identify and deal with psychosocial hazards. So that's why we tend to have lots of safety people on, and we're going to do that again today. So this episode, not only do we have a safety professional, but we have someone that is a member of what I call the safety media, is also a podcaster and takes time to share safety-related information with folks. So I thought it'd be good for us to get together and chat. And during this recording, actually, he's just leaving the field. So this is, but it's recorded, of course, so it's not happening exactly when you're seeing it, but this is at the end of a shift. It's, we were just talking before we got on, before we started recording about these. This is real. These are the things that are going on every day. And we're going to chat a little bit about that experience and some other topics. As I so often do, I have a question, and that question involves an introduction of my guest by my guest in this way. Who is Mark Anthony Williams?
Oh boy, David, you're going to put me in the spot like that. All right. Hey, folks, my name is Mark Anthony Williams. I'm the principal consultant at Mark Anthony NW Consulting. But I'm a bit of a double agent because I also live a career in occupational health and safety, environmental compliance, and risk management. I've held a variety of roles within the industry over the last 8 years. I know kind of the best of both worlds in terms of workers' comp, risk management, environmental compliance, safety management systems, developments, you name it. I've been through it in this field. Um, David is quite right. I did just leave the field. I did have a unexpected incident that required my attention, as all of them typically do. And this one, as Murphy's Law states, happened literally at the end of the day. So here I'm in my car in the Batmobile.
Right. Well, we'll yeah, we may delve in some detail into that as we get into our conversations. But before we do that, one other rather standard question I tend to ask: what does psychological health and safety mean to you?
So to me, it means the mindset that employees have within their working environment. How safe do they actually feel with the work that they're doing in the environment in which they're working with? And how comfortable are they in bringing up their concerns about safe work, hazards they're experiencing, things that they observe that they think could be done better? Do they feel like there's going to be some sort of negative consequence or reprimand for speaking their true mind, even if it's something that legitimately concerns, a safety management issue or a hazard exposure they're experiencing from the work they're doing? Or do they feel like the environment is conducive to taking that feedback and having some continuous improvement and even commending them for speaking up, having the bravery to speak up, or stopping the work itself before somebody gets hurt, refusing to do unsafe work. And I think a lot of, especially in construction, a lot of the mindset is get the work done as quickly as you can, as cheaply as you can. Um, it's hard work. Don't be a sissy. Don't be soft. You know, kind of the macho bravado thing. What do you expect? Of course, just get on that ladder. Well, the ladder's not tall enough, sir. Then get on top of it. I don't think I'm supposed to do that, sir. By any means necessary, just get that thing done. Instead of realizing that it's kind of a systemic issue, right? If you're not setting me up for success, I shouldn't compensate for your lack of preparation by risking my life or exposing myself unnecessarily to dangers. That's not fair to me. What are you going to
Mhm.
tell my family?
Right, right. And I think it's important, something that you mentioned. It is about the environment that the person is in, not necessarily always about the human being. Because, and I say this often, that organizations, whether they be construction companies or retail outfits or local governments or whatever they might be, nobody hangs a shingle up and says, "Hey, if you're a really terrible worker, come over here." Nobody does that. They always are looking for the best, the people who are the most skilled, the people who are going to do the best work. So why is it that we bring in what we consider to be good people, otherwise we shouldn't have hired them, and then all of a sudden there are issues where they feel that they can't speak up relative to their own safety? One has to wonder, and I believe it's about the environment. I really do.
I would agree with that. I mean,
Absolutely.
just looking at, and before I even say that statement, let me just say rules of engagement matter at every single level, right? So the way in which companies are allowed to conduct business and the way that compliance and regulatory requirements are rolled out in some instances, they do allow a lot of gray area and almost defeat the point where it turns into a what can you prove versus what is actually being done, right? Because there's a lot of litigation and legal liability. And I don't think that was originally what it should have been about. Now, I get that that might have been the stick that got people in line, but that's not the why you're trying to keep people safe. You're trying to keep people safe because it's the right thing to do. When this just comes down to, hey, we think as long as we're compliant, we're safe, that's a fallacy, right? I remember presenting at the ASSB conference last year, and a lot of people thought it was interesting what my topic was. My topic was compliance does not equate to results, because I'd worked with so many companies when I worked for a consulting firm that they thought compliance, as long as they're compliant and they're checking these certain boxes according to the CFR on applicable topics, that oh, we're gold standard safe. And I'm like, no, that doesn't mean that you're applying the best practices or even effective practices in the field just because you could prove you're doing a certain thing, right? This is the equivalent of me saying somebody asked me to paint a wall and hey, I just put one stripe of paint on it. I painted the wall. Where's my money? Right? Well, you expected me to paint the entire wall. You expected me to paint it evenly. You expected it to look good, right? You expected me to get the corners. You expected the paint to not be on the floor because I put frog tape down. Those are best practices that are kind of unsaid, unspoken expectations, right? But those are the things that kind of drive the excellence of what you're doing, right? So what's the point of doing it if you're not actually going to drive excellence and do it for the right reasons? And I preface that, like I said, this is the preface, right? I preface that with saying that because companies have kind of lost that focus on why are we doing what we're doing? Are we just doing this to protect ourselves legally? Or are we doing this because this is a core value and we really want to have that conducive environment where we are taking the feedback from the people to be legitimately better in how we manage safety and quality and all these other aspects of our operation?
Yeah, and again, uh, when when we say get back to, in some cases that suggests that folks did it right or did it appropriately or were at a high standard to begin with. And the reality is, at least in my experience, is that many organizations were not built with safety as their real primary goal. They weren't. They may say it. They may say safety is number one. Well, no, you didn't build safety as the number one. You built compliance as number one. You built making money as number one. So again, this isn't intended to be a criticism of the people. It's a observation of the system that's been built. Because if it was built to be safe, if it was built to focus on the human beings that were involved, then you really wouldn't have some of the challenges that you have. And again, I'm really into being candid about that. And let's be realistic. Who was going to do that? It's not as if you had anybody. The safety professional wasn't at the table in the first place.
That's a fair
You
point.
know,
Originally, who was at the table that designed the Constitution, even in a way of putting it, right? I ain't gonna
yes,
go into
sir.
that, but you see where I'm
Yes,
going with this, right?
yes,
As
yes,
much
sir.
as we might put in all these amendments and these patches and stuff to now put in these future considerations as things come up, we're always gonna have to kind of deal with the disadvantages of we didn't start off on the perfect foot in a sense.
That's right.
So
That's
we're
right.
always
So
going. There's always going to be some sort of gap as a consequence of the original intent behind what was designed.
the original intent matters. Original intent matters. So speaking of original intent, so what is it that got you interested in occupational health and safety to begin with?
Whew, you and these loaded questions, David. Oh my God, you did not prepare. You should have sent me like a list or something. Um, a couple things. So I'm an immigrant. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. I've been in the United States for 12 years now, I would say. I think I'm gonna think no 12, 12. I came over. I had a full scholarship for undergrad, and I built a life. I've built a career in safety. I've gone through grad school twice. I've worked for a variety of companies, both small, large, private, public. Right? I understand how this market kind of works. What got me into safety, I would probably think, is that when I was an immigrant and I was still building a career, just came out of undergrad, I needed to make money, right? My emphasis was, hey, I need to make money to survive. I gotta take care of da 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 and all that over. And one easy way of making money was to go to the temp agencies to work. And you have different kinds of temp agencies, right? You have the ones that focus on manual labor, they pay you at the end of the day. So if you're trying to get gas money and make some groceries. So typically what I would do is I would go work for a temp agency early in the morning, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be done by, let's say, 2. And then I go put on a suit and go hand out resumes and apply for jobs, career jobs. And that allowed me a little bit of flexibility in being present enough to be my own administrative assistant and do what was necessary to get my start, while also fulfilling the real world need for, hey, I need to make a living and pay for some stuff and da 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 da. And again, I'm not from here, right? So I'm still learning how all these things work. I can't really say, oh, I'm from California, da 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 da. So a lot of people, aren't always liking to just immediately hire an immigrant for, jobs in an office and whatnot. Um, while I was working at these temp agencies, one time or two, might have been three, they sent us to, let's say, Jacksonville, Florida. We would have to replace shingles on some of the fast food restaurant roofs, right? And again, this is like 5 o'clock in the morning early because they're expecting to open, at like 7, right? So it's like underly. And I'm here with, some kind of a mixed group. There were a couple Nigerian guys, a couple Mexicans. I think I was like the only Caribbean guy there. Um, and we were putting the shingles on this sort of conveyor thing that would kind of shoot it up to the roof. And then we put it down and we'd have to, staple it, bang it in place with the nails and all of that on the underlayment. And one of the guys almost fell. Right now, at this point, again, I don't know anything about safety, but in my mind, I'm like, well, I mean, shouldn't he at least have a rope around his waist or something? And the supervisor over the whole activity, hurry up! What are you doing? I don't care if you fall. Not necessarily, I don't care. Yeah, but I don't care if you fall in the sense that I don't care about if you hurt yourself. I more so care about the time it would take me to deal with the paperwork and deal with the aftermath of you falling. Because then if you hurt yourself, we have to call the ambulance and blah 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 blah, and then get workers' comp involved. And again, I didn't understand any of this at the time, right? But he seemed so more focused on getting this physical job done than actually this tiny man. The man was like 5'2". He was probably shorter than Kevin Hart, right? And he doesn't speak a lick of English, which again, like I think that's probably why the supervisor was talking all of this crap because he probably knew as well. Well, he don't understand me anyway, so I could speak my mind. But I understood. I talk perfect English, right? And a couple of the other guys did too. So it didn't really foster a good environment. One, it made it very hard to do such menial, hard work and feel like you're not being valued. Two, and three, our literal lives were not really being seen as valuable. It was just like, okay, we need you to put these shingles on this roof and secure them before 7 a.m. Right? And then we're gonna drive you all back to Tallahassee, which is another drive, right? And you guys will go and work on something else, and then you get paid for the day, and bye bye. And that got me thinking, right? Um, Ironically, my undergrad was in environmental, and it kind of stirred something in me because I had learned about EHS while in undergrad, and I know I was looking for an HSE job or an EHS job, and I thought I just wanted to really focus on environmental compliance. And I realized that actually, you know what? I think I want to sort of dive into the S a little bit. And I started doing some more research to understand the Department of Labor and the history of labor and unions in the United States and how all of this stuff got built essentially. And that gave me an appreciation for everything that's around me. Everything that I see built now, even I go to the grocery store and I see shelves packed, I know that that took someone's labor to put that stuff on the shelf. I know that it took someone's labor to design the packaging that that food is in, right? It took a lot of consideration for the type of packaging, the temperature, the sanitation behind it, all of that, right? I know that when I see truckers on the road and I see a hustler pulled at the side of the road, I know it's because he's over his hours in the DOT system and he has to reset. And he didn't want to get tracked going over that threshold, so he pulled over the closest place he could find a safe spot on the side of the road, and he put his flags and cones out per the requirements, and he said, "Okay, I guess this is where I'm camping for the night." That's a sacrifice to get me and other people what they need, right? So that sort of motivated me to get into this field because I felt like I can make a difference. I can utilize my skills, my education, and build upon it. I didn't like what I saw. I didn't like how I saw that man treated. I didn't care if he was the same skin color as me. I didn't care if he was my brother, my cousin, my aunt. I didn't care. All I really cared about was the fact that, gosh, somebody could really look at another human being, and all they see is that he's just labor.
Yeah, yours is a very compelling story that doesn't get told often. And I'll be honest, even In these episodes, I often get folks, and we have, and intentionally so, some, rather academic conversations about these topics. But what you've just described is real world. That's
Yeah,
the real, that's
that's
the
still
real
happening
deal.
today.
J-
That's still
It's
happening
still
today.
happening today. Again,
So there's a bottom line profit margin that somebody's trying to beat based on, hey, I'm gonna pay this guy minimum wage or $12, whatever, but I'm gonna take the job at $40 an hour, and he's gonna get a small portion of it, and my job is to minimize, how much he's costing me, so we can maximize our profits.
yes, yes, yeah, and that, I find that those of us who have experiences around, either people almost getting hurt, getting seriously hurt, or in my case, seeing people actually get killed at work. Anytime something, someone who's not really motivated by that, I kind of wonder about them. I wonder, yeah, I just wonder that if those types of things, if they don't get your attention, it still doesn't for everybody, but thankfully it did for you. So based on, uh, from your view, what would you say the current state of safety in America's workplaces is, in 2024?
Whew.
Your opinion, just your
Okay,
personal opinion.
my opinion. Let me preface this by saying that in no way am I representing any organization except my own.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
These are just my personal thoughts. They are not a representation of any other organization, company I've ever worked for, or company I work for, or anything like that. So I'll just put that out there. I'm not responsible for any repercussions for my thoughts. Um, I feel like the current environment is changing slowly, but I don't think it's necessarily from OSHA themselves. I think that there's a lot of third-party organizations like the NSC, the ASSP that have popped up that are driving interest due to career demands. But I do think that the financial incentive behind it in some ways distracts from the purpose. And that no different than careers in, say, nursing or pharmacy. And ironically, now the cycle has come full circle, right? Now we have a nurse shortage yet again, right? 5 years ago wasn't quite the case. But we don't have a nurse shortage on pharmacists when 5 years ago we did, and pharmacists were getting sign-on bonuses and making six figures just straight out the gate, right? And all these pharmacy schools popped up, pharmacy programs, because they're like, hey, we could charge them for this. They're going to pay with student loans, it's guaranteed money, and they're going to pay it back with their future money, right? And the incentive for people to get into it in the first place was this. And now so many people went through that the field is flooded, and now the demand is not there because there's more supply, right? And now the pricing has come down. Well, I say all that to say that people who got into pharmacology for the wrong reasons, they're not necessarily going to enjoy it or be as driven to do their due diligence as people who did it for the right reasons, who actually wanted to help people, wanted to take care of people. And I think it's kind of the same thing with safety, where we're seeing kind of a drive for this field as it evolves, especially as it evolves to include sustainability and ESG and stuff. We see all these programs pop up and all these organizations that say, "Hey, pay this membership dues and hey, get this certification." And I get it, right? It's kind of a game, but it does distract from the real purpose. Are we really distributing awareness of the hazards in these environments? Are we really developing the next generation properly, or are we just taking advantage of this novel interest to make a buck today, right? And I see that it mirrors what industries are doing in general with how they treat employees a little bit, right? Where, hey, the goal of this is to be profitable, so we have an inherent conflict of interest between doing the right thing and saying things that might upset our sponsors or upset our the companies that we rely on to feed students to, versus, hey, you know what, these 10 or 20 companies, here are the things we're hearing from our surveys, our feedback. Here are the suggestions we think you should take. Um, if they don't shape up, we're going to recommend people don't shop there or that people don't work there, you know? I'm being quite frank about it a little bit, right? Why is it that Glassdoor doesn't have a kind of a safety rating on it? It has every other rating on it. You ever thought about that? Everybody uses Glassdoor. How come Glassdoor don't have a rating for perception of safety?
Yeah. So Mark, you've shared a bit about your story, how you got into safety, and again, now you're kind of a two-hatter, both working for another company and then having your own consulting practice. One of the things that I noticed that you've created is this, as what you call the safety manager's playbook. I want to know a little bit more. I mean, again, I don't need you to recite every single word, but uh, tell us a little bit about that safety manager's playbook and what was your thoughts behind developing or creating it?
There's so many layered thoughts in the creation of the playbook, but the primary one was that I felt like people were talking about safety management at such a high level without making it digestible and understandable foundationally, and also giving examples and ideas of campaigns and programs that deal purely with the management of behavioral safety, and getting people's buy-in, versus just, hey, this is the theory X, this is the theory Y, this is the, and I'm like, that's all great and fine and dandy, but like, give me a framework about how all of this stuff kind of fits together in a facility or in a business, so that even if I'm a specialist, I understand what each function is for and how it works. And then give me a toolkit of ideas, especially if I'm starting at a new facility, or maybe this is my first go as a safety manager where I can build something, I play with clay. What should I be looking to have in place to keep the boat afloat, right? While I work on other things. And like we said, compliance is the bare minimum, right? So there's compliance and then there's safety management. And I think a lot of it gets sort of intertwined into the same bucket as if it's the same thing, as if they're synonyms. But that is not necessarily the case, right? Compliance is essentially meeting certain requirements set forth by some independent body that kind of has control of you or leverage over you in some way, right? You are compliant with them. Now, obviously, if they change their expectations or requirements, right now you're not compliant with them, you may have to do something different, right? They might raise the bar, they might lower the bar. Now, tell me this. We hope that the bar gets raised, right? So they're asking me to do more that is in the best interest of my employees and makes me better as a company. But in some instances, that is not necessarily the case, right? That's not guaranteed. So are you telling me that if the compliance bar gets lowered, now you're going to do less? What about the consequences of doing less? So this is why I kind of say, you should not be chasing mere compliance, because compliance is just a bar that you're trying to hit. It doesn't mean that you're getting actual benefits of safety management, right? It doesn't mean that you have functional programs in place to manage the different aspects of safety that are going to happen. Do you have effective injury investigation processes? Do you have effective case management processes in place? Do you have what you call them, effective near miss reporting or hazard identification processes in place? Do you have something for a safety committee or something to get the people's feedback, some sort of bridges that where all layers can kind of come together, right? You have them participating. Do you have campaigns like why work safe? Things that make people realize like, hey, this is a human element to this. This is not just because the company tells me to, is because we care, right? Like I need to have my own personal motivation added to it, right? That's the purpose behind it. I'm not just doing this because my boss said, well, you have to wear gloves when you're using a machine. You have to wear glasses. It's no, you want to be able to see your grandkids later, right? Okay, there you go, right? You want to go home and be able to walk your dog, right? Well, you can't do that if you're missing legs, right? I would hate for you to be missing some legs. And from a supervisor management perspective, if you're responsible for people and you're basically the general telling them where to go, when to go to war, what to do, when you make bad decisions, the consequences are not just on you, it's on the people that followed your instruction, right? So you kind of have sort of a responsibility built in to make good decisions and do your due diligence to protect your people.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow FlourishDX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the FlourishDX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
So again, we've heard a bit about your career and about the playbook. You've got all kinds of activities going on. So tell me a little bit about your podcast. So you want to be a safety professional? That's actually how I heard about you, is through your podcast. To be honest, yeah.
Yeah, it's a small world, ain't it?
Yeah. That's what I call this. I just thought about that when I was getting ready for this one. Kind of the safety media. So I guess we're both in the safety media. So go ahead.
You weigh much more than me. Shoot. So I really, it came about as a question because, like I said, people would approach me and ask me, "How'd you get into safety?" And you seem to be doing pretty well, and da 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 da. And in my head, the question that would always kind of, I wouldn't always say this out loud, would be, "Oh, so you want to be a safety professional, huh?" So sitting with some friends, having a brunch, and they said, "Oh, that'd make a pretty interesting book." I was like, hold my tea. 6 months later, we're talking again. "Oh, that would make a pretty interesting podcast, wouldn't it?" I'll be right back. And it started off kind of as a joke, to be fair. And we did 10 episodes for season 1. And I started putting out, alerts asking different people, "Hey, would you be interested in being interviewed?" And then I'd make the questions and I come up with the topics that I want to talk about that I thought people would really appreciate, especially someone who's new to the field. And before I know it, hey, now we're finishing season 2, and I'm like, okay, all right. And I just stuck with the same name. Because they both sort of complement each other, right? You can either buy the book if you want to read privately, you don't have time to sit down and watch a show, to watch a whole season, or you can sit down and watch the entire playlist on YouTube, Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, whatever is your jam. It's on all of those, right? So I just I thought I'd make it as accessible as possible. I'd make it as easy to understand as possible. And I'd really just sort of embrace the world that we're living in, because I wanted as many people as possible to benefit from this, even if it's years from now. It could be 5 years from now. Someone's like, I'm thinking about joining the EHS field. And I realized that there weren't a lot of resources that really sort of taught you about the different aspects of safety in that way as a newcomer. It was always from a more scientific, logical approach, very curriculum driven. That's great. But if I want to just, get experience from people who are working in the field and hear their perspectives and topics that are relevant to that field that I might be interested in working in specifically or have questions about, yeah, to me, that appeals to me a little bit more, to have that firsthand account and experience accessible.
Right. Yeah, I that could probably be said about a lot of occupations, that um, there are sometimes that people get they know so much about it, and they inadvertently talk over other people's heads. I don't think they're doing it intentionally. I say that a lot about intentions, because I don't know what people's intentions are, and I prefer to believe that most people Yes, most people do things that they believe to be the thing to do at the time with the information that they have. I don't think, now that's not everybody. There are some people who don't have good intent, but I think that those folks are rare, and they're really rare in the safety profession. You don't get into a safety profession because you hate people. I mean, no, you may get into it for even a financial reason, but you want somebody to make money, even if it's only you. Um, so you tend to get people who are doing things that they believe to be right at the time. And to the conversation we were having earlier about compliance, there are folks who they believe that's it. As long as we comply. But to be quite honest, I'd rather have people who want to comply than people who don't. But I think to your point, it is it is more effective if you go more for more than compliance. That's kind of the minimum you can do. But there's a lot more out there that people miss out on because they don't think about, what could be a little bit more effective. And again, to this idea about trying to make this profession, conversations about safety, digestible to anybody, because guess what, hazards are digestible.
There's
they,
different
they,
ways to
they,
split hairs in that one.
I'm telling you, I
Some people
mean,
be like, well, that's just a hazard of the job, you're getting into. But was it though? It's only a hazard of the job because you refuse to eliminate it.
right, right.
Because you think it's too
O-
expensive.
or or some in some situations you didn't recognize that it was a hazard. You thought it was, and because it isn't for you. And this is where we get into the conversation about psychosocial hazards. Is you and me could see the very same circumstance very differently. And as a safety professional, I it's important that I not discount your view and your experience, because you're seeing something I'm not seeing. I mean, you talked about before we came on about, a situation you had just today, the day we're recording anyway, where some folks, they what they saw and what you saw were different. And it doesn't make them bad people, but it does suggest there's a system issue when you see that there's mud all over people's rearview mirrors and all that, and that to them is not that big of a deal.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
very true. Or like I said, driving a buggy cart, there's no horn on it. Imagine, again, you're behind a 10,000-pound forklift, rough terrain forklift, coming back on you, and you're thinking, well, he should be able to see me, right? But he's not stopping. Or he's about to hit me. And there's no horn.
Right.
It
Right.
seems absurd, but that
Yes.
that happens. There's
Yeah.
so many
Yeah.
little things that sort of build up and have the domino effect. And we can't just rely on people to, one, do the right thing all the time, and two, know what to do and what that right thing is. We can't.
Right.
They need
Right.
help. They need
Right.
support.
They do. They do. And that kind of is a nice segue into the next curiosity I have, is because you also talk about the importance of leadership in terms of safety as well. Safety is not just about a playbook and a curriculum, and it's also about leadership. Whether that leader is a safety professional or not, there are still some issues that connect a strong safety culture and leadership. So could you share a little bit about your thoughts about how they're both important?
We have a saying back in Trinidad. We say the tail doesn't wag the dog, right? It starts from the top. It starts from the head. The head tells the tail to wag. And how I see that is in a variety of ways, but the way that I see that applicable to what we're talking about is I can't expect employees to have buy-in in the importance of safety and taking all these extra steps and doing their due diligence when higher leadership that should be the example or the pillars of what the company stand for, exemplifying what are the expectations of the company. They observe them cutting corners. They observe them not taking it seriously. They observe them prioritizing, just production or the bottom line versus their lives. And they feel like people don't care about them. They feel like, well, I'm just a cog in the wheel. I'm just here to make a check. And you're the boss, you're the supervisor, and you're trying to squeeze as much as you can from me for what you pay me. And I think that when you create those very pseudo transaction relationships, and people can sort of see or feel, right, their perception is that you don't really give a rat's about me, like, why should I go above and beyond? And then their perception is that safety is going above and beyond instead of it actually being a requirement because it's a valuable thing. It's one of the key values that are prioritized by the company, and they don't see that, right? So I almost want to say that leadership drives excellence in safety because you need to lead by example. In the same way that you would expect people to do the right thing, it shouldn't just be because you tell them to do. People are going to do what they see you do. And if they see that the system allows you to get away with doing certain things, not wearing your safety glasses on the floor, or going into a trucker's yard without a class 2 vest, or not wearing gloves when you're touching chemicals, if they see that the system allows you to cut corners just fine when you're invincible, right? Then why is it not okay for me? Is it just because your name is supervisor and mine is shop operator or something? That's not a good enough of a reason, a human mind, to not think, well, that risk is not really that much of a risk, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, there is no question that leadership creates the kind of environment. Now, again, I don't want to say it's 100% because um, it's. I even say as a safety professional, it's not really my responsibility to make other people be safe. It's my responsibility to give them information so they can be safe because
There
I
you go.
can't do it for them. I
There
mean,
you
I
go.
can't.
I can't
Yeah,
put a gun
as
to your
much as
head,
we, yeah, as
and I
much as
can't
we
do
have
everyone
these
wants.
compliance rules and that type of thing, particularly when you're dealing with adults, you can't make people do things. You can assign a consequence if they don't. But, I don't have time to run up to everybody and forcibly make them, you know, uh, do whatever it is. It's got to be important to the person. And my job, provide as much information as possible so you can make a decision. But again, we got to find ways to get this into the hearts and minds of people so they see this is right for them. This is the person that I am most responsible for is me and making sure that I'm safe because I can't get to a work site or do a course or a class or consult or help anybody if I get myself injured. You know, so I have to, I have to focus on, making sure I'm in a safe environment myself and then sharing as much of what I can in terms of information and ideas and suggestions. But ultimately, it's got to be on you. I mean, it's got to be important enough to you, and particularly if you're the leader, because as you said so aptly, people are going to follow what you do,
Yeah.
not what
You
you
could
say.
think that nobody's watching and that you're getting away with it, and you could look both ways before you steal a cookie from the cookie jar. But guess what? Just because you got away with it at one time doesn't mean that you're gonna get away with it every time. Right? And granted, when we actually catch somebody doing something unsafe and they say something along the lines, or we assume, oh, that's just a one off. No, that's probably the one time that you happen to be there at the right place at the right time to observe that, which means that it's probably going on more consistently and more often than you are probably comfortable with, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Most, again, and I would say this with both physical and psychological related safety, that the issue is often about the system. It's about the system. It's about the culture that system allows to exist. And then it's about the people. They're probably the last piece because, I mean, if you'll notice, these companies and organizations. I was actually reading a story the other day about an incident that occurred in March of 1930, if I'm not mistaken. And the company, and I'll call their name because it's publicly known. The company was Union Carbide, and there was a tunnel that was
You did
being
not
built.
just bring up, oh Lord.
I did. I said it because it's publicly
Okay,
available information.
that's
So
fair.
uh, the company Union Carbide was building a tunnel in West Virginia, and uh, this tunnel, it's the Hawks Nest Tunnel. People can read about it, but there were approximately 5,000 employees. About 3,000 of them worked in that tunnel, and many of them ended up with silicosis because the company, the system allowed and then kind of encouraged people to work without protective gear. It had, as a matter of fact, sadly, this was a case where people would die and they would call their relatives and say, "Hey, they're just missing," and never really inform them that the person had died. This is also the same company that was responsible for the methyl isocyanate leak in Bhopal, India in 1984. So again, that culture persisted for 50 plus years until something else happened. You see what I mean? And there were probably different people involved. I'm sure there were different people, but that culture remained. That culture remained. So again, if that system and culture doesn't get changed, you're going to get the same kinds of results. And again, I'm not here to cast judgment on anybody. I'm not saying that any of this was done intentionally. I don't know people's intent. I know that this is the publicly available information about this particular incident. But what I'm saying is if individuals don't take this seriously enough to do something different as it relates to their physical and their psychological health and safety, then you're going to get the same outcome that people got when they didn't do this in the past. Because again, the hazards don't care. The hazards do not discriminate. A respiratory hazard will affect a rich person and a poor person the
There you
same
go.
way.
It don't matter how much in my
They
bank account. We
doesn't
both
matter how
got
much money
lung.
you have.
We both bleed
Yes.
red.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So wow. So we've covered quite a bit. Had a kind of a really interesting kind of conversation. Again, at the end of the day, So if people just cut in at this point, and go like, "He's sitting there," yeah, this is at the end of a real work day
And it
where
will work,
real
man.
things happen
Look what
with
I
a
got
real
home.
safety.
I could show you
Yeah,
my helmet in the back seat.
with a real safety professional. So I really appreciate you taking some time. So before we conclude our conversation, um, if there are folks who want to get kind of more information about you, the consultant, the guy who has some additional resources, they want to follow your podcast because, like I said, I do often get folks who have podcasts and books and businesses uh, and frankly, I think it's important that we be able to share that information with the people who follow me, the people who follow you, because we all have something to contribute, but I think it's important that we let folks know that there are folks out there who have ideas and and may be able to help a particular company. And
I'm
in
more
your
than okay
case,
to share it. Like we're here to help.
absolutely. So share a little bit about how do people follow you on the podcast, get your book, reach out to you? How do they do that?
So they can go to www.markanw.com. I have a lot of free resources on my business's website. We have a free resource section. We have an event section. They can schedule a free initial consultation with me to talk about what they might need, and we can come up with custom packages. But we offer EHS consulting services. We can do a la carte, or we can do EHS support package where you'd have someone assigned to help you build a safety management system. We have training programs in place for training curriculum design and delivery of the trainings themselves, both virtual and live. We do business advisory as well, because in some instances, it's not necessarily just safety management that's lacking. It's that there are other processes that are lacking upstream in terms of quality and production that we can help you become more efficient at, right? And then, finally, we have a lot of EHS motivation, as I like to call it, right? I call it EHS motivation because I figure people need sometimes a little bit of encouragement to do the right thing and think that what they're doing, realize what they're doing, or reminder that what they're doing is worth it, right? So we have videos for EHS motivation on YouTube for safety professionals. We have a lot of articles written for safety professionals that may improve their perspective. And before I even go any further, one thing that I really kind of forgot to mention a few years ago, I heard this. Um, it's called a case method, right? It's a little silly, but basically it says, how do you know that a training was successful? And the way that you know a training was truly successful is change behavior. Because if at the end of the day, after you've delivered training or handed out resources or, handed out toolbox talks, whatever have it be, people are just throwing that on a locker, throwing it in the trash, or leaving it somewhere and going back to doing the same thing when nobody's looking, that means that it didn't do as good of a job as you thought, right? And the CASE stands for communication, awareness, support, and empowerment, right? Communication meaning that people have to feel comfortable talking about a topic, right? They have to feel as if there's not going to be any repercussions. The awareness being that they have to be educated on the topic so that they can recognize when it's happening, when that situation is around, when that hazard is around, what the true consequences are, so they can make better judgment calls, right? The S stands for support. You need to have systems and tools in place for them to do that right thing, mechanisms for them to report, ways for them to see what is going on, or look at the data or the information and truly, get kind of a grasp of the situation. And finally, the E is empowerment, right? They have to feel empowered to do the right thing. They have to see a sense behind it, a purpose behind it. They have to see the point of it, not just the, with and what's in it for me, but hey, I see this machine is acting strangely, is malfunctioning. And while it didn't affect me directly, I could see the danger in it. Let me go put in a work order. Let me go tell my supervisor. Let me go lock it out so nobody else could use it after me in the next shift until it gets fixed. Right? They're doing the right thing. That may not necessarily directly benefit them today, but it's helping your fellow man. It's protecting somebody in the future. And that future person may do something to protect you in turn that you don't know about. Right? So it's kind of all a cycle a little bit, but I think it's kind of a big part of psychological safety, and people understanding that we do have to empower our people. They do have to feel comfortable, and it all starts with that system, like you were talking about. The system has to provide all 4 letters of case.
Right.
So that's how
Well,
I
Mark,
want to remember it.
Absolutely, Mark Anthony. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. As I said, it's really important to me to get safety people talking about safety, so that and converting that knowledge into how we apply it to psychological related things. Because sometimes we can go really down the rabbit hole about psychosocial hazards and all that type of thing. But what I'm finding in my conversations is that some of the people that I talk to about psychosocial hazards don't know what a hazard is. So they can't pick out a psychosocial one because they can't pick out another one either. And yeah, any hazard at all. So as I often say, psychosocial hazards are just like all the rest of them. They'll harm you, but they're just another hazard. And the same kinds of policies and procedures and practices and systems that we use for a physical hazard, we can use for this one. It's not that hard. It really is that hard. It's not scary. and and again, a lot of the mitigation, that is necessary is basic things like providing training for people, like making sure that when people speak up that there isn't a negative consequence, like making sure that everybody has, protective gear that fits them. It's common sense things that when they are not done, that's what creates a psychosocial hazard because people notice. I mean, they may not have the words for it, but they notice that something is wrong. And again, to the point of the early story that you provided about your experience, hiring people temporarily and then placing them at risk with no orientation, no anything.
That was nothing. And now as I look back at that probably every day and think, oh my God,
how fortunate are you?
Yeah, I was like, what was I doing on those roofs on that McDonald's?
Yes. And those circumstances are affecting people every day, and that's part of that's part of our. I think part of our call is to get as much information to people as possible so those things don't happen. So again, thanks very much for spending some time with me. So to those who are watching this episode on the Flourish DX YouTube page, please do like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you're watching or listening to the podcast for the first time, welcome. I hope something that you've heard will encourage you to come back and check us out again. Previous episodes of the podcast can be found at psychhealthandsafetyusa.com. And please do become a part of the Psych Health and Safety USA movement by connecting to us on LinkedIn. We do lots of work on LinkedIn, and we'd love to have you join us there, become a subscriber, and look forward to our next gathering. So until next time, please do what you can to be safe and help others be safe. Till our next conversation on the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Thanks very much. Tune in each Friday for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to David at id2-solutions.com, or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.